Auburn has two freshmen on offense that might be flying under the radar.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's Recruiting Thursday. We're joined by Brian Smith, Locked On recruiting expert and host of The Portal. Be sure to check out The Portal wherever you consume Locked On Auburn. You can find The Portal there as well. Brian, we'll talk about some battles to watch from a roster standpoint and what Auburn may need to do after spring, as well as who's the most underrated member of this 2026 class as far as the commits go. But I want to start things off with some guys who are flying under the radar as far as Auburn signees, the guys who are about to be, or I guess who are freshmen now, that are about to be going through their first spring. And you gave me two names that I thought were interesting. Let's start on the offensive line first.
I'm going to go Broderick Shull.
Yeah.
Auburn and offensive tackles. You and I have unfortunately had that conversation in many unfortunate ways, and they're finally getting a guy that everybody wanted. Why couldn't he at least compete for the 2 deep? Like, one guy gets hurt, he might start some games this year. Wouldn't shock me. He played at Bixby. It's a really good program. That will help him transition to the SEC, and also he's got the requisite size. He was pushing 290 like in December or whatever. He won't have any problem being 300 plus by the time next fall rolls around.
Yeah, I guess the interesting thing about Shull, and I'm with you, I think he's one of the guys in this class that I'm most excited about. But I don't know if I'm most excited about him for this year. I think as far as the state of the program, like you needed Broderick Shull. Like Broderick Shull is one of the more important guys in this class. But the path to playing time is a little tricky because you bring in Xavier Chaplin, you bring in Mason Murphy, those bookend tackles. And then you've got Xavier Miller that came back. And then also, like, if you have a bunch of tackles that get hurt, would it be Broderick Shull that they give a shot to, or would they move Dylan Wade back out to tackle? So I just have a hard time seeing him play this year, but I do think he's good enough to at least crack the 2 deep, and hopefully he can kind of start that ascension this spring.
My only concern with any team is just the depth with one injury. Things.
Yeah.
That's if all goes well and they don't have injuries, Broderick will play in 4 games, red shirt, and then next spring compete for a starting spot. That's what you want.
Yeah. Let's
hope that it ends up that way for his sake and Auburn's.
I mean, it's kind of amazing, though. I mean, all the tackles that we just listed, and we're also talking about Auburn football. And it's like, Xavier Chaplin, Mason Murphy, Dylan Wade, going to play more guard this year, we hope, than tackle. Seth Wilfred, Tyler Johnson, Favor Edwin. We'll see if he can develop as a player, as a tackle. We'll see how they use DeAndre Carter. I think he's an interior guy. And then Broderick Shull. I mean, has Auburn had a tackle room like this in the last decade? The answer to that is no.
DeAndre Carter is the one that's really interesting to me because that is a man-child.
Special.
I want to see him at guard. Could he play right tackle? Sure. But I would rather have him on the inside. And like next, I think Johnson's a little underrated. I think he'll end up being a really good tackle for Auburn long term. He's still learning. He's a younger player. You get 2 guys like that next to each other as road graders, then you don't have to bring in Shull or whoever early, Favor Edwin, etc. You need your guys that have been on campus, the junior college kid you mentioned. You need those guys to hit. So you can get into a point where these guys have to go through it for 2 years, learn it, go through the strength program, and then you're not just scrambling every year for finding another tackle or guard to start.
Brian,
too long.
You cover essentially roster management from recruiting and transfer portal and NIL on your show, The Portal, every day. Let me ask you this. I mean, there's so much discussion about the top quarterbacks being pretty fluid, with like 60% chance of them leaving.
That's right.
At this point. What are we seeing with offensive line? Are we seeing that offensive linemen kind of understand the situation and that they're going to be more likely to stay for 2 or 3 years at a program, or are we still seeing movement and they're just not getting enough coverage because offensive linemen don't get as many clicks as quarterbacks?
A little of both. Offensive linemen historically stay more than any other position. It's not competitive. I don't know the full dynamic, but a buddy of mine said these guys bond and they want to be at the same place. To that point, the final 4 teams in the playoff, all but I believe one guy from Ohio State, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Texas were high school signees by those programs.
How about that?
That's 95%, brother.
How about that?
So if you screw up high school football recruiting at the O-line position, probably does not bode well for your long-term opportunities. So
that's so interesting. So looking at non-transfers on this offensive line, because like this year it's still going to be pretty heavy transfer.
Sure.
Dylan Wade is a transfer. Mason Murphy a transfer. Xavier Chaplin a transfer. Okay, that's not as bad. But then you're like Jeremiah Wright's got a chance to start. He's a high school guy. He came from high school. Connor Liu the same way, and then a lot of the other guys that we're mentioning. So Auburn's almost at that point where they've been there long enough where those guys are almost ready. Your Tyler Johnsons, your Seth Wilfred came from JUCO, but that counts the same as like high school recruiting for some reason. I don't fully agree with it, but that's how it's counted. So I do kind of wonder, like, is this the last year where Auburn really relies heavily on transfers at the offensive line position? And could Broderick Shull be symbolic of that somehow?
Well, if you look at the teams that have won over the last 5, 10, 15 years, how many of them relied on transfer offensive tackles? Name one.
Well, the landscape has changed in college football to some extent. I mean, there's really like this conversation really needs to go back like the last, 4 years? 5 years?
I mean, even the kids when they'd set out, it's just the position doesn't transfer a lot. It's more now because of the instant eligibility factor. There's more chance.
But compared to other positions, it's still not as much. It seems like it. I mean, Auburn hasn't really lost any offensive linemen to the portal.
That's what I mean. It's weird.
And also, there not really seem to be a whole lot of like big O-line targets every portal window either.
It's odd that you mentioned that. I was speaking with somebody who does NIL negotiations. He's the money man.
Great. Yeah.
He speaks with all the schools, SEC, ACC, and all that. And every school tells him, let us know if you know of a lineman. Like there are none that want to get in the portal. Like it's hard to find D tackles too. That's the other spot. Like there just aren't any that get in the portal unless they're coaxed into it. I don't really know what that is. Like the elite D tackles are probably next on the board. There aren't a lot of those guys anyway. They just turn pro instead of transferring. But those two spots.
Is that a schools just pay to keep them, or is it the mentality of the position? Where like we've talked about this from a recruiting lens before. Like those guys don't typically do a whole lot of interviews. They aren't typically, the guys who want videos or any kind of extra stuff. Correct. They'll just put out a tweet. And they'll say, yeah, I'm going here. Thanks. And then they don't really flip. They don't really take any other visits typically. Is it just the mentality of the position? It's like, it's not about me. It's about the team. That's kind of what the good linemen think. That's the way they think. I don't know.
That's, I guess, especially again, offensive line is on its own level to a certain degree, D tackle, but DN and D tackle, those guys are coveted so much. There's more money involved. Sometimes they'll be coaxed into the portal.
Yeah. All right. There's a pass catcher, could be a pass catcher that I think is also flying under the radar. You agree? We'll tell you who that is next, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Factor. If you're looking to optimize your nutrition this year, Factor makes eating well with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh and never frozen and are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. You can select on your Factor plan how many meals you want a week, and it comes in a box that's refrigerated. You take them out, you put them in your fridge, and when you're ready to eat, you just zap them for 2 minutes in the microwave, and you're ready to go. Then you just throw it away. There's no mess. There's no prep. It's so easy. They've got 40 options across 8 different dietary preferences each and every week, so you can pick the meals that you get excited about every single day. You can eat smart with Factor. Get started with factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege 50 off and use code LockedOnCollege 50 off. That is LockedOnCollege, all one word, LockedOnCollege 50 OFF to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That is code LockedOnCollege 50 off for 50% off your order and free shipping. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back for taxes. And then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today. And then that expert will find every deduction possible from every file and form and every investment with 100% accuracy. There's no waiting, no worrying, no wondering. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantee. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. For your second listen, go check out Brian Smith over at The Portal. However you're consuming Locked On Auburn, you can consume The Portal there as well. Brian, another name that you and I talked about before we clicked record was Ryan G, the tight end. And if you're an everydayer here at Locked On Auburn, you know Ryan well, a guy who came from Milton and who I think with the current situation at tight end, I think he's going to have a solid chance to earn reps and play early. You think Ryan G's underrated?
I do, for several reasons. Number one, he's mature. He understands that you got to block, you got to be a teammate. Milton High School is one of the best programs, not just in the state of Georgia, United States. So he's been around and seen what it looks like. That'll help his transition to Auburn immensely. And he's just really physical. The first thing that keep most tight ends off the field early in their career, they couldn't block me, let alone a guy that's, playing at Bama or Georgia. He's physical enough that he'll be competitive. They can use him at H-back, etc. I think they're going to find a way to get him into the rotation sooner than later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. So Ryan G, another name to watch for sure. So this past weekend, you were at Under Armour New Orleans. Seems like you're at a different place every single weekend, covering the stars of tomorrow and some of the top players in all of high school football. And you said there was a few names that you think Auburn fans kind of need to be aware of.
Tylen Wilson, he's a kid from Pascagoula. It's a famous high school program right on the Gulf. And he told me Clemson, A&M, and Auburn are just three schools are going to get visits. This is a long elite.
What position is he?
Well, whatever he wants, but free safety most likely.
Okay.
He is one of those kids that pretty much pick up the phone and go wherever he wants.
Got it.
Very intelligent kid. He was one of the guys that led the Under Armour drills. Coach Cox put him out there first. That's not unintentional. And he's a guy, even though he's a safety, he moves like a corner.
Okay.
He's an NFL player.
Got it.
He's going to take an OB to Auburn. There were tons of linemen, and there'll probably be more visits, but in particular, a guy that I want to talk about against skill. If they can get Xavier McDonald on campus, he's one of the best receivers in the country. He's out of Morton, Mississippi. He didn't even need to go to the camp. He played the game this past year, and he still came out and competed, dominated, did the drills, all that. Love those kids. He can go wherever he wants, LSU, Auburn, all the schools down south, but he's going to take an OB to Auburn. That's an elite player. And then a kid that is blown up is Hayward Howard out of Edna Carr High School in New Orleans. He's a corner. You can never have enough of those. And that's the one spot Auburn seems to really do well with anyway. 6'2" corners don't go out of style. And he won DB MVP. He told me afterwards he was probably going to take an OB to Auburn. So that's a national recruit too. Yeah.
I mean, the importance of schools being able to, I know you mentioned, a few different states there, but to go into Mississippi and to go into Louisiana, I mean, that's something that Auburn's going to need to do if they're going to want to compete for, take that next step in the SEC.
100%. And they're in on the right guys. So now can you finish?
Yeah. We talked about it last week as far as like what the next step for this class is. And it seems like you're seeing more and more names pop up, which is normal. That's part of the process. But some of these guys with July being a dead period now, you got to think that the next 2 months are going to be crucial as far as guys go ahead and getting in the boat to kind of lock things up before their senior season start.
Most of the kids that I spoke with at Under Armour, whether it was Miami, Orlando, IMG, Atlanta, or down in New Orleans, it's the same thing. They want to be done if they can before they really start their senior year. And I don't blame them. They don't want guys like me contact. They want to be done. So between June 20th and about July 10th is Armageddon for recruiting. And there'll be days that I do 10 plus podcasts on the portal. It is what it is. So It's fun, but be ready because it's going to be fast and furious. And again, most of it's June. I don't know if Auburn has got more than one weekend. Don't they have May 30th? I forget which weekend it is. It's a big
there's
one.
A few where it seems like everybody's taking an official visit, like one of two like major weekends. Yeah.
So they might get a few a little earlier than some other schools. Some are waiting longer. Everybody's got their own philosophy. But again, June 20th to July 10th, that is the lock. Everybody's going to be pretty much done. There won't be many guys left on the board.
Yeah, it just seems like there's so many guys. There's at least 3 or 4 that it's like, okay, they seem like a heavy Auburn lean throughout this entire process. Like when we talk quarterback a lot, like Travis Burgess seems to be there. Auburn seems to be in a really good spot with what's the name of his teammate who plays linebacker? Anthony Davis. Is that it?
Yeah, that's the kid who's an inside back, a really good player.
Yeah. He seems to be a heavy Auburn lean. Vodney Cleveland seems to be a heavy Auburn lean at this point. It's like we've kind of heard all of these names for so long, and it's like, okay, like it's about time. It's like it's about time for all of these guys to kind of hop in. And so I expect that to happen over the next 2 months.
I expect some of them to commit at Auburn spring game or shortly thereafter. That's the other thing. Spring games are big for that. This will not be any different. Auburn, they probably do as good a job as anybody within, let's say, 200-mile radius of campus. They do a really good job of bringing kids in for unofficials.
Yeah, no doubt. And so, we see that with game days. You see that with Big Cat, which has been moved now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with all that. There's a battle that I'm particularly interested in, Brian, to follow for Auburn spring practices. So I want to jump into that, as well as get your thoughts on what Auburn may need to prepare to do following spring, as far as what to do in the transfer portal. So all of that coming up right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out and online shopping and entertainment, it's so easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money, it's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete finance command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your entire first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off of your first year. That's at monarchmoney.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Brian Smith, host of The Portal. Make sure that is your second listen today. He's going to talk about a lot of Auburn targets that he saw over the past weekend there. So be sure you're caught up with all the recruiting scoop over at The Portal. A battle, I mentioned this yesterday. The battle I'm most interested in right now, I think, and this could change, but right now is who's going to be that third outside guy. We're all assuming Cam Coleman is going to be, one guy. And then I think Eric Singleton, because of Malcolm Simmons, is going to be your other outside guy, is how he was used at Georgia Tech. But who's going to be that third guy? Is it Horatio Fields, the transfer receiver from Wake Forest? Or is it Perry Thompson, the second-year player that, obviously was tied so much to, the Iron Bowl drama that was Perry Thompson with his recruitment? And I think right now, like, my money, I think the odds on favorite would be Horatio Fields, but I think this coaching staff wants Perry Thompson to win it, if I had to guess.
Well, it would benefit them in a lot of ways because he's an underclassman and he's an in-state kid that they got over Bama. Look, this is politics. Let's not kid ourselves. They want the kid that they recruited from in-state to be dominant to help them long-term. Now, Fields is my pick as well. Yeah. Just looking at his stats, and by the way, Wake Forest was not a good football team this past year, but he's from Douglasville, Georgia, so it's an area that they're familiar with. He's a big body guy, so he fits that outside spot. 39 catches, 463 yards. He had 4 touchdowns, 4 8. Awful football team. So what could he do if he actually gets the ball in more circumstances? I'm going to lean to the guy that has production. This is something that we saw as a trend last year in the portal after this season, like use Florida State. They took a bunch of transfers from Bama and Georgia that were 5-star burnouts.
Right.
And how did Florida State season go?
Not great.
Yeah, not good. Indiana took a bunch of G5 guys that had a whole bunch of production. They went 11-1. Mm-hmm. So I'm going with the production guys. Maybe I'm just following the leader here, but I'll take him. Now, Perry, he's a kid that's learning and developing, and like you walk up and shake his hand, that's what it's supposed to look like, brother.
For sure. Yeah, he looks great.
22 pounds, and he has no body fat. Looks like a prize fighter. So now can he get the routes and all that stuff down? And in worst case, he's going to learn from Fields and be a rotational guy. But that'll be a really interesting battle.
Yeah. I mean, Auburn has so much talent at receiver. It takes a different level to get on the field than it ever has, or at least the last 10 years at Auburn, which is what you want. You want to raise the standard of what it takes to get relevant reps at Auburn. And I think they've done that with recruiting. But Perry, like, his upside is tremendous. It's just, he played so tight, and it didn't really seem like he had a whole lot of routes to rely on. It seemed just like nothing was crisp. And there's a full off season now because he didn't go through spring last year. He got in a little late. Does a full off season in a college system allow him to take that step forward? And I think that's the argument for Perry Thompson. And if that happens, if he puts it all together, Brian, and he beats out Horatio Fields, it's only good things for Auburn.
Yeah, that means your competition's working out and the pile's getting pushed forward. Right. That's a winner right there. So
that's right.
And for those that don't know, Perry's a really down-to-earth kid. If he's not going to go stomping off if he doesn't win the job. He's not that personality. So that also helps. But there's enough competition. You could play Singleton in different spots too. I mean, they can do different things. That's the other thing. Will they move Perry around? How much does he learn in the scheme? So maybe he backs up Cam part of the time so he gets some more. There's a lot of ways they can use it.
That's a good point.
He's big enough to play the boundary. I mean, he's built for it.
So many of these guys can do different things too. Like Singleton and Fields, they both played out wide and at slot at their previous stops. Malcolm Simmons, I think, is capable of both of those things. I think Cam Coleman's kind of your guy out there. He's going to be your main dude, but I think he can do more if you ask him to. But I think that's going to be what he's at. Like, could Perry be moved around formationally? Maybe. The thing that's so interesting to me, and I don't think this is the case, but I am going to speculate, is so many reps and targets went to Rivaldo Fairweather when he lined up in the slot last year. And what we're going to have to see in the spring was, did Rivaldo get those reps as a tight end, or did he get those reps as just like a large slot receiver? And so maybe you could put Horatio there or Perry there, like schematically. So we'll see who lines up, if it's going to be, Preston Howard or Ryan G or Rico Walker or Brandon Frazier. We'll see where those guys line up in spring, but that's another thing that I'm looking at.
I hope that Perry is used in all kinds of situations, especially like short yardage goal line. Again, he's over 220. That's a guy that if you put him at H-back, the other team's got a linebacker on him on the 3-yard line. That's not a very good matchup.
And that's what you call a mismatch, Brian.
That is 100% correct, Mr. Blackerby. So it's just up to Perry to learn the scheme and to learn the technique, because physically, that's exactly what it's supposed to. At the NFL, that's what it's supposed to look like.
Right.
And he's 19 years old.
Right. So we'll see. As far as, what you think Auburn needs to do in the spring window, talked a lot about it yesterday, but my biggest concern seems dramatic, but I do think the biggest need and the main targets will be defensive linemen. I just think they need more of them, and I think they'll need a linebacker or two.
I don't disagree. This is kind of what we were talking about earlier, and one of the reasons I picked Shull. Like linemen in general, if you don't have them, man, you just get exposed with the most basic play, especially if you have an injury. Or you have an injury run at a spot. Like, God forbid, if Falk got injured and had to miss 2 games. That's really hard to replace that guy, especially if you had another backup that wasn't ready. So Auburn is in the same spot that about 98% of the schools are in. We need another defensive line.
Well, I think it's a little different here. Do you know how many interior defensive linemen Auburn has that aren't true freshmen? You want to guess?
This is going to be a bad number. Like 4?
3.
Okay, that's horrific. Okay.
Yeah, Dallas Walker, Bobby Jamison Travis, those are probably your noses, right? And then Malik Blockton, who I assume is your starting 3. And then you got freshmen, Malik Autry, Jordan Crawford, Antonio Coleman, Darian Smith. Good group of true freshmen. But you need more.
Freshmen tend to have poor technique and don't have the ability to hang on in the later. Like games 8 through 12 in the SEC, the wall for a guy that's different. I like all the D, like Jordan Crawford, whoever you like is your favorite D lineman coming to this group, and pick whichever one you want, Coleman, whatever.
Yeah, they're all good.
Most of them are going to hit a wall. You need at least one guy that's played 2 years at minimum in college come in and help. Like Kieran came in last year at edge. He didn't start, but he played a lot of reps. And if it wasn't for him, they would have been in a really tough spot. Like, what was it? Arkansas State, I believe he came. Like you never know where you're going to get your pot of gold.
Yeah, and I think they got a dude in Chris Murray from Sam Houston State, which Sam Houston is not a state. Need to stress that. But I think Chris Murray's really good. And then they brought Amaris Williams back. Could they scoot him or Keldrick in certain situations? Like, that'll be interesting to see. But like, you need more 3 techniques at least.
Yeah, it's the going rate is just horrific.
But I don't think you need a star.
No, but the thing of you got to go pay like $600,000 for a guy that's going to play 12 snaps a game. That's the problem. Like,
that's wild. It's wild
because there just aren't any. It's supply and demand, brother. There just aren't many of those guys.
Yeah, and so then it's kind of like, well, do they just in the back of their mind, or they're like, well, we're fine with our second, 3 technique being a freshman and our third nose tackle being a freshman? Like, are they just fine with that? They might be. I don't think it's the worst strategy in the world, but I do think you need at least one more.
The experience factor and the leadership is the other part of that.
Yeah, sure.
I know.
I think Malik Blockton can be the leader though in that room.
He's a little different than most kids his age.
Yeah,
he's more mature, so that helps. And he was actually pretty good last year when he played.
Great,
but he's still a true sophomore.
Yeah,
that's a lot to ask.
Can you get a Malik Blockton level of production out of a true freshman defensive lineman from 2 of these 4 guys? It's a lot to ask. But I don't think it's a crazy thing.
I wouldn't bet against it happening, but at the same time, you're one injury away from a kid who's not ready to play being your guy. That's my concern.
Yeah, sure.
If everybody stays healthy, they'd probably be all right, but that's not a realistic expectation.
Right. Brian, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
Every day, all day, the Portal Podcast, recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal. We'll have some Auburn stuff. We're going to have a lot of portal stuff coming up. We're going to be doing some previews, Auburn being one of them. And you can find it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, please like the video. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.